Thanks so much for tuning in today to watch another episode and an interview of Front Porch Conversations at Advent Christian Village. My guest today is Tom Peaks, and Tom, thank you for agreeing to be on this side of the camera today.
It's odd for me to be on this side of the camera. Normally I'm behind it.
And that's why we're able to have these programs, is that you're on the other side of the camera, taking part in filming and editing and making us all look like we are having a good conversation, which I hope we'll have today.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit about me.
Okay.
It started on a rainy night in Georgia.
I've heard of a song like that.
It was. I think they wrote that song about us. But anyway, I was a war baby. My dad was in the Army. My mom was a sharecropper's daughter in South Georgia, not very far from here. But anyway, I followed his work around while I was living with him. I started kindergarten in High Springs, Florida. We moved the following year to Jacksonville, and I did my elementary school years in Jacksonville.
What school?
I went to Arlington, Hogan, Windy Hill, and one other one. Not in that order, but we moved around a lot. Until I retired from the Navy, I never lived in one house for longer than 3 years, my entire life. Well, we got down to Stuart, Florida, and I was 16, and my dad hurt his back and had to go in the hospital. So I quit school to help support the family. And the next year I went back to school, and I just could not handle that anymore. After having been out, saw what it was like to work and everything, I says, I can't handle this. So I talked my parents into signing the papers so I could join the Navy at 17. And I did, and I left. I was born in March and I left in June. So I was what they call a kitty cruiser.
I've never heard that term.
Kitty cruiser, if you joined when you were 17, you got out the day before your 21st birthday.
Oh, okay.
Well, I hadn't been in it about 3 years, and I was stationed down in Key West. And I was an engineman, worked on big engines, diesel engines. And I decided that I didn't like working on diesel engines. I wanted to do something more romantic. And so I told the Navy, I says, okay, I'll stay in the Navy if you will give me a different rate. Mm-hmm. And so I picked aviation electrician. So the day that Kennedy put the blockade around Cuba, I was traveling north and everybody else was going south. I was leaving for aviation electrician school in Jacksonville that day. And that's the last time I've been to Key West. But I went through AE school, went to Texas for a couple of years, and I had put in a request to go to Operation Deep Freeze. And they picked this request up. We need electricians bad. So I went to Operation Deep Freeze. And that was really a super job.
Now, is that a location or an assignment?
Both.
Okay.
Okay. We were involved in supporting the geophysical year, which started like 57 or something like that. They were studying life and stuff in Antarctica. And so the Navy did all the transportation on the ice, the South Pole.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally we had to do maintenance on the aircraft, so we went to Antarctica to do maintenance and deliver people around and goods and so on and so forth. That was very good because I got to spend about, over the 3-year period that I was in the outfit, I spent probably 8 months in Christchurch, New Zealand. Christchurch, New Zealand is really a beautiful town. The people are fantastic. And I got to spend about a year in Antarctica over a 2-year period. And I enjoyed that. So I went from Operation Deep Freeze to VQ1 in Atsugi, Japan. Well, I had always dreamed about going to Japan. That was one of my dream things. I got to Japan and I fell in love with Japan. It was just fantastic. It was better than anything I'd ever dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
And I even learned how to speak some Japanese.
What ways was it better than you even expected it to be?
Well, the culture is what made it. It's the people. They really had a lot of, at that particular time, this was 1967. In 67, they still had a lot of respect for Americans. That changed later on, but in the 60s, they still had a lot of respect for Americans and sailors and so on and so forth. I learned the food, the culture, the whole 9 yards. Well, while I was there, I decided that I wanted to fly. Well, if you flew in the queue, you'd spend 3 weeks in Japan and 3 weeks in Vietnam. And when we were in Vietnam, we flew 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 21 days, which was really good because it got you out of the heat and into the cool air.
Mm-hmm.
But the job that we did was a phenomenal job. It was our task to do SAM and MiG warnings. SAMs are surface-to-air missiles, and MiGs are the Russian-built fighter aircraft. And we would set off at the Vietnamese coast, and if they launched an aircraft, the North Vietnamese launched an aircraft, we would track it. And if it was going near any of our airplanes, then we would call up MiG warning.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with SAMs. There was a good movie about that, let me see, Flight of the Intruder. It goes into what happens when they shoot a SAM and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that was a very rewarding job. And of my naval career, that particular job was the most important and the most rewarding part of my naval career. I went from Japan back to Texas, was down in Kingsville, Texas for a while, and then moved to Meridian, Mississippi. Was there for a while. And then I got orders to a carrier.
What carrier?
The Oriskany, the USS Oriskany. The Oriskany was the last small deck carrier the Navy had. And when I say a small deck, it was not that much smaller, but it had been built as a straight deck carrier. They took it into the yards before I got there and made an angle deck on it, which was a small deck carrier.
How many personnel would be assigned to that size?
5,000.
Oh, only 5,000?
Yeah. And so I'm on my first Westpac cruise, on my first carrier, and they called me up and they says, "Tom, come up here to the division office. We've got something for you." This don't sound good. So off I go, and they says, "Here's your orders. You're going to the mess decks. You're going to be mess deck master at arms." A sheriff? Me? A sheriff? Never. Well, turns out that being on the mess decks underway is the best job in the Navy.
How so?
The food is really, really, really good. Not only is the food good, but when you're in port, I would do 24 on, 24 off. And so that meant that I could stay in town with my girlfriend, which became my wife in the Philippines.
Oh, okay.
I married one of those little brown girls. I was married to a Filipino for 30 years. And so after we left the Oriskany, we went to Guam, and that was her first time on American soil, which Guam is a possession, not a state, but it's a possession. And we spent almost 3 years in Guam, and that was very enjoyable. Guam is where I sobered up. We'll go.
That's a whole other story.
We'll go there in a little bit. But anyway, what happened was that brought me up to within a year of retirement when I left Guam, and I did my last year in the Navy at NAS Norfolk, Virginia. I spent my first year in the Navy at escort piers in Norfolk, Virginia. But I spent my first and last years in the Navy in Norfolk. And after I retired, we moved to Kingsville, Texas, which is just outside of Lubbock. And I worked for Texas Instrument for 5 years. And we moved from there in 1985, we moved to just outside of Savannah, Georgia. And we lived in Savannah until my wife passed away in '05. And I sold the house in '07 and moved into an Airstream travel trailer and lived in the Airstream for about 10 years. And
Now, did you travel, or was that your
Well,
residence is
I had planned to travel. I had gotten to Texas. Excuse me. I had gotten to Texas and found out that I needed bypass surgery. So I'm recovering from the bypass surgery, and the doctor says, okay, you can travel now. He cleared me to travel. And so I'm sitting there, and something happens to people when they recover from bypass surgery. You go into a deep depression. And so I says, well, I'm going to go back to Georgia and get my feet under me and see what happens then. Well, I got back to Georgia, and the anchor got stuck on my air train, and it would not move. It just says, I'm not moving, I'm going to stay right here, and it's still right there. But I was getting on, and my diabetes was showing its head, and the bypass surgery, one thing and another. And I says, I'm all alone. I've got a brother, I've got two brothers and a sister, but I don't think I want them changing my baby diapers when I get older. So I started looking around, and I moved to the Armed Forces Retirement Home in Meridian, in Gulfport, Mississippi. Well, I was really happy down there. I was with all of my military buddies, you know, and the teasing that goes along with the meals and all that sort of stuff, and everybody spoke the same language and all this. It was really good. Gulfport is a nice place to live. It's not great, but it's a nice place to live. Well, anyway, they came down one day and they says, we're going to raise your rent a little bit. Well, the little bit turned out to be 110% rent increase.
Oh, my word.
It would have been paying $100 a day to live there. And so I'm talking to a friend of mine, a guy named James Hendon. He lives here now.
Mm-hmm.
And I says, James, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going back to Live Oak. Live Oak, that's in Florida. Yep. I said, what are you going to do there? He said, well, there's this place there called Advent Christian Village, and it's a retirement community, kind of like here, but a little bit better. And I says, better than here? He said, yeah. So I started looking at it, and I says, that sounds pretty good. And on a Monday, I came over and looked, and I says, I could live here, and I could enjoy this place. Let me sign the line here. Let me fill out these paperwork. And so on Thursday, they called me back and they said, you've been accepted. And so I says, that's fast. It's, well, yeah, it is, but that's okay. And so I came back, and there was a trailer for sale over in Park of the Pines. So I bought it, and 3 weeks later, I'm moving in. So I'm here. I believe that God planned this for some reason. I don't know why yet, but I believe that He had planned for me to be here, and He led me through all these doors and everything to get here.
Well, I, for one, am really glad you're here. And for many reasons, but the possibility of a show like this is because you're here. And thank you for that.
Now, back.
Mm-hmm.
While I was in Operation Deep Freeze, we had this guy come in, and he was an electrician also. And he would come to me every day, and he would say, and he would poke me in the chest when he was saying, Tom Peaks, if you don't quit drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, you're going to die and go to hell. Okay, whatever. I wasn't really religious back then. And so we get to New Zealand, and this guy, I'm going to call him Jerry, says, Tom, let's buy this car I found. You pay half and I'll pay half, and we'll share this car. Okay. Well, I got to use the car twice, I think, in the whole summer that we were there. And Jerry was going to down to the ice. He was going to winter over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2 or 3 days before he was to leave, I woke up and somebody had cut the tongue out of my safety shoe. Just cut the tongue out of my safety shoe. And I hobbled to work and I says, Chief, I need a new pair of safety shoes. He says, Tom, I just bought you a pair of safety shoes 3 weeks ago. What's wrong? I said, well, somebody cut the tongue out of my shoe last night. Oh my gosh. Okay, go get you a new pair of safety shoes. So, well, 3 days later, well, when this was going on, Jerry's sitting over in the corner, and so 3 or 4 days later, after Jerry crawled on the plane and went to Antarctica, this guy comes to me. I'm gonna call him Sam. Sam says, I want my money back, Tom. What are you talking about? He says, well, you sold me that car. Whoa, 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 whoa. I did not sell you the car. I've been looking for the car for 4 or 5 days now. I can't find it. He said, you can't find it because Jerry sold it to me. And I want my money back. I said, why? He said, well, I got to town and a rod started knocking. So I pulled the pan off, and this is what I found. And he's holding the tongue to my safety shoe. Jerry had slung a rod in the engine. He had cut the tongue out of my safety shoe, wrapped it around the crankshaft, put the engine back together,
Oh my goodness.
and it was using this piece of leather as a bearing on that particular cylinder. Well, I'm sorry. Well, this was early in the morning. I stewed over that all day long. How could this guy do this to me? He lied to me, he stole from me, he stole from Sam. He's just a common criminal. And he had the audacity to come and poke me in the chest every day and say, Tom Peaks, if you don't quit drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, you're going to die and go to hell. So I said, In the bar, I says, give me a scotch on the rocks. And while he was pouring that one, I said, give me another one. And while he was pouring that, I says, I don't need Jerry, nor his God, nor his church. And I stayed drunk for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
And so when I got to Guam, I sobered up. Well, I'd been sober for about 10 years, which brought me out to my son in high school. And so we're sitting in church. Brian, my son, was going to a Christian school. It was Pineland Baptist Church and Pineland Christian Academy, run by Pineland Church in Savannah. And we was sitting there one day in church, and the sermon was about forgiveness. That's what God's been trying to tell me all this time, that I needed to forgive Jerry for this great sin that he had committed against me. And we had altar call. So I went down, I got down on my knees and I said, God, I understand now, and I'm going to need your help. But I understand that I need to forgive Jerry for this wrong that he did to me and Sam. And when I stood up, everything in the world changed. I mean, literally, everything in the world changed. My attitude, my perspective on life, what I needed to do and where, and it's just been getting better and better and better every day since then. Now the whole point of my story is that you cannot foster hatred.
Right.
You have to forgive and forget. Not necessarily forget, but hold no ill will to people that do you wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And my life has just been getting better and better and better ever since.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful story and a testimony. And Tom, I can't imagine you without your big smile and your happy spirit.
Well, that's part of what God gave me. It's this outlook on life that I cannot give enough back to compensate for what He's given me. And I'm not looking ahead, I'm looking at right now.
Mm-hmm.
God has given me so much happiness and so much education. The photography, the video, the just all about life. It's absolutely beautiful what He's given me, and I certainly appreciate it.
Well, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear the story, and I know others will. And that's why I want to do this program, ongoing with so many people, because so many people have such wonderful stories to share. And it may be something that happened like you in a more recent time in their life.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, and so everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story.
Cut. But can I back up a minute?
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much for your interview today. I've enjoyed it. I'm learning more about you every time I'm with you, and I want to also thank you for serving our country.
Thank you very much for saying so.
You're welcome.